Welcome back to our channel. Do you have a penny from 1960, 1972, 1975, or 1979? These Lincoln cents might look common, but rare mint errors, double dies, and copper varieties could make them worth hundreds. Like and subscribe now to find out if your penny is a hidden treasure. In 1960, America stood on the threshold of a new decade, a period of boundless optimism, rapid growth, and cultural transformation. John F. Kennedy was running for president, the Cold War was intensifying, and the mint was working overtime to keep up with the increasing demand for circulating coinage. The humble Lincoln cent, still bearing Victor David Brenner's iconic design introduced in 1909, was being struck in massive quantities. But amid the millions of pennies minted in Philadelphia and Denver, an anomaly was born, a subtle yet significant error that would decades later become one of the most talked about and sought after pieces in American numismatic history. It wasn't just one coin. It was a strange duality, a pair of varieties that appeared harmless at first glance but ignited a storm among collectors, the 1960 small date and the 1960 large date. At the time, the U.S. Mint made a mid-year modification to the date style, reducing the size of the numerals in an effort to improve die longevity and aesthetic balance. The result was the birth of two distinct types of 1960 pennies, each produced in both Philadelphia and Denver, each with their own subtle characteristics, but there was more. As the year progressed and dies wore down or were retired, the minting process introduced unintentional errors. Some dies were overused. Others were improperly aligned. But the most captivating error to emerge from that year wasn't merely a result of aging machinery, it was something that occurred deep in the die preparation process. Somewhere between engraving and hubbing, a slight misregistration caused doubling. Not on the periphery, but directly in the date. The 1960 was stamped with a ghostly echo. Not once. Not twice. But on multiple working dies. And as those dies went into production, a rare class of double die obverse cents began entering circulation, undetected, unannounced. It wasn't until the mid-1960s that a few keen-eyed collectors noticed something strange in their change. The number 6 in the date looked off. The 9 seemed to have a faint outline next to it. By 1970, enough examples had surfaced for numismatic journals to take note. The coins were catalogued, studied, and eventually given a classification, 1960 DDO, double die obverse. And among them, the most famous were the 1960 small date Lincoln cents with dramatic doubling. The doubling on these rare cents is nothing short of striking when viewed under magnification. The numerals in the date appear shadowed, with clear separation visible in high-grade examples. The word Liberty shows doubling along the tops and sides of the letters. Even, In God We Trust, is affected in many specimens, particularly the G and the D. This was no post-mint damage. It wasn't the result of wear or circulation. It was minted into the coin itself, a time-locked fingerprint of the die's creation. In Denver, similar activity was taking place. Some 1960 D cents showed faint doubling as well, but the strongest and most valuable specimens remain the Philadelphia minted 1960 small date varieties. While millions of both small and large date cents were produced, only a tiny fraction featured this particular double die error. And of those, even fewer survived in high-grade condition. As years passed, collectors began to realize the scarcity and importance of this variety. Coin shows buzzed with whispers of those who had found one. Dealers began offering small premiums. Coin magazines published guides to help enthusiasts distinguish between small date and large date designs, especially to identify the extremely valuable double die variant. The value of these coins began to rise, modestly at first, and then explosively as pristine examples were certified and sold at major auctions. One of the turning points came in the late 1990s when a sharp-eyed collector named Marvin stumbled upon a near-flawless 1960 small date double die penny in a roll he'd purchased for $30 at a local estate sale. At first, he thought it was just a clean example of a small date cent. But something about the 6 and 0 in the date caught his eye. He submitted the coin to a grading service. It came back MS 66 RD, red, mint state, and nearly pristine. The doubling was unmistakable. A few weeks later, Marvin's coin was auctioned privately for a jaw-dropping $57,000. That sale broke barriers in the numismatic community. Collectors began aggressively hunting 1960 pennies. Bulk bags were bought. Bank rolls were unsealed. The search was on for the elusive double-die examples, particularly the small-date varieties, whose scarcity made every new discovery headline-worthy. Over time, only a few dozen confirmed high-grade examples were known to exist. Each had to meet strict criteria: strong, clear doubling on the obverse, minimal wear, and sharp luster. Anything less was dismissed or relegated to lower collector tiers. The best specimens were preserved in vaults, graded and encapsulated, their coppery brilliance as vivid as the day they were minted. The popularity of the 1960 small-date double-die penny only grew in the 21st century. It became a staple of advanced Lincoln cent collections. Major coin grading companies began issuing special labels for authenticated pieces. Videos and articles were published to educate the public on spotting them. Yet despite all the attention, only a handful surfaced in top condition. What made these coins even more fascinating was their place in American minting history. They represented a transitional year, a design evolution, and a technological hiccup that managed to embed itself in the most common of coins. The 1960 penny was supposed to be routine, ordinary even. But through a perfect storm of artistic decision, mechanical flaw, and historical timing, it became anything but. Today, collectors still comb through penny jars and bank rolls, hoping to find one of these elusive pieces. And while thousands of 1960 pennies remain in circulation or tucked away in basements, only the rare few show that unmistakable doubling, those ghost-like imprints in the date and legend that whisper of a mistake made over 6 decades ago. And for those rare finds, especially in pristine red uncirculated condition with strong doubling, the market continues to reward handsomely. Depending on the grade, clarity of doubling, and overall eye appeal, a genuine 1960 small-date double-die obverse Lincoln cent can fetch between $65,500 and $132,200. It's a penny by denomination, but a priceless story in metal, one of oversight, rediscovery, and extraordinary value. In 1972, the hum of machines echoed inside the United States Mint, stamping out millions of Lincoln cents in a rhythm as familiar as the design that adorned them. The face of Abraham Lincoln, resolute and timeless, had watched over American pocket change since 1909, with Victor David Brenner's artistry continuing to dominate the smallest unit of U.S. currency. That year, nothing seemed different at first glance. But beneath the surface of uniformity, something had slipped through, something the naked eye might miss, but which the experienced collector would come to recognize as one of the most compelling minting mysteries in modern numismatic history. The 1972 Lincoln cent was produced in large numbers. Over 5 billion coins poured out from the Philadelphia Mint alone, a colossal output that made the odds of any one penny standing out seem impossible. And yet, within that flood of copper-plated steel, a select few bore an unintentional secret, an error so vivid, so precise, and so undeniably dramatic that it would send waves through the coin-collecting world for decades to come. It would become known simply as the 1972 double-die obverse. The story of this rare error doesn't begin with the press or even with the coin blank. It starts earlier, at the hubbing stage, when the working die receives its impression from the master design. A misalignment during this delicate process, when the hub impresses the design more than once but in slightly different positions, can lead to a dramatic visual doubling on the finished die. If that flawed die goes unnoticed and is used to mint coins, it creates a batch of error pieces. In 1972, that's precisely what happened, but this wasn't subtle doubling. It wasn't the kind you needed a magnifying glass to see. The doubling on the 1972 Lincoln cent was unmistakable. The inscriptions, "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and especially the date, 1972, itself appeared as if shadowed by an almost mirrored duplicate. The doubling was sharp, clean, and spread out enough to catch the light. When collectors eventually discovered these coins, they weren't whispering. They were stunned. At first, only a few of these coins surfaced. A keen-eyed numismatist named Harold had been sorting through rolls of pennies in early 1973, just as he had done every weekend for years. He was looking for wheatbacks, transitional metals, maybe a nice uncirculated 1968. But something stopped him cold. The 1972 on one coin had a strange glint to it, an outline that didn't look like wear or damage. Under magnification, the doubling jumped out. Every numeral had a ghostly second image. The B and E in Liberty seemed to echo off the coin's surface. Harold didn't know it then, but he'd found one of the most prominent double dies of the modern minting era.as news spread. More collectors began to search through their change. The U.S. Mint quickly acknowledged the existence of the error but didn't issue a recall, as the coins had already been widely dispersed. The exact number of double die coins minted remained unknown, but estimates placed it in the tens of thousands, scarce compared to the billions of normal 1972 cents but just common enough to keep hope alive for diligent seekers. What added to the mystery was the existence of multiple double die varieties from that year. In fact, the 1972 cent holds the distinction of having several recognized double die obverse variations, but only one, now catalogued as FS 101, is considered the most dramatic and valuable. Its doubling is so significant that it can be spotted without tools, though high-powered magnification reveals its full beauty and precision. Collectors became obsessed. Roll after roll was opened, sorted, catalogued, and scrutinized. Dealers began to list the coin in catalogs, and grading companies added it to their registries. In time, the value of a strong double die example began to climb. Coins in circulated condition fetched modest premiums, but uncirculated examples, especially those with full red luster, became the holy grail. One collector, Denise, found her specimen while buying penny rolls from a local bank. It sat buried in a $125 box, nearly unnoticeable among common dates. But her attention to detail, honed over years of casual coin hunting, led her to pull the coin aside. It was bright, with virtually no marks. The doubling was clear as day. She submitted the piece for grading. It came back as MS 65 red. She turned down multiple offers from dealers, choosing instead to wait. A decade later, she sold the coin at auction for over $90,000. The beauty of the 1972 double die cent isn't just in its rarity. It's in how unassuming it is. To the average person, it's just another Lincoln penny. Tossed in jars, slipped into vending machines, forgotten at the bottoms of drawers. But for those who know where to look, and what to look for, it's a window into the mint's mechanical vulnerability, a reminder that even in mass production, perfection sometimes falters in fascinating ways. More than 50 years later, the excitement around this coin hasn't dulled. Its dramatic visual error, historical context, and the thrill of discovery continue to captivate collectors both new and experienced. The coin has found its place in the registry sets of elite numismatists, preserved in climate-controlled cases, its doubling forever frozen as a monument to the quirks of human engineering, and for those fortunate enough to hold a pristine example of this extraordinary error, especially one certified at a high grade, the reward is more than sentimental. Depending on its grade, color designation, and strike quality, a 1972 double die obverse penny can command between $58,000 and $120,500. A simple cent, transformed by accident and recognized by generations, remains a testament to how even the smallest imperfection can create lasting value. In 1975, the atmosphere inside the U.S. Mint facilities was electric with the buzz of machinery and the unmistakable scent of freshly struck metal. That year marked the continued tradition of producing Lincoln cents, a task the Mint had carried out faithfully since 1909. With the United States in a period of economic uncertainty, inflation creeping into everyday conversation, and Americans adjusting to shifting cultural tides, the penny still held its ground as a daily staple in commerce. To the eye, a 1975 1-cent coin was as ordinary as any other, a copper alloy disc carrying the image of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. But hidden among the billions struck that year, a small handful of coins bore a difference, an error so rare and elusive it would take decades to truly comprehend its significance. As routine as the coin's appearance may have seemed, the path of its creation was anything but flawless. In the Philadelphia Mint, coins were being struck by dies that had been used thousands of times, some worn slightly, others replaced hastily. Amid this hurried production process, a particular die became the unintentional architect of a unique anomaly. 1-cent coins struck using this flawed die would possess a trait that numismatists would one day revere: a subtle but unmistakable doubling effect, misaligned letters, or an off-center strike, signs that the coin deviated from minting perfection. Yet the most remarkable examples weren't immediately discovered. In fact, the coin that would eventually send ripples through the collecting community didn't reveal itself until many years later, when a retired postal worker named Raymond began going through an old tin of change he had kept since his service days. He wasn't a professional numismatist, just someone with an eye for detail and a curiosity that wouldn't quit. As he examined coin after coin, one particular 1975 cent gave him pause. The date seemed off. Not blurry, not worn, but almost like it echoed faintly beneath the surface. Intrigued, he set it aside that he thought little of it until he brought it to a local coin club meeting where a more experienced collector took a closer look and immediately noticed what Raymond had overlooked. The doubling wasn't just on the date, it appeared on the word liberty and the motto "In God We Trust" as well. A faint but clear secondary image ran just beneath the original design. Under a 10x loop, the error came alive, deliberate, precise, and undeniably valuable. The coin had the markers of a double die obverse, a highly sought-after minting anomaly, word spread. Specialists examined the piece and concluded it was not only authentic but one of the finest preserved examples of its kind. It was not alone, other examples soon emerged, all exhibiting slight variations of the same fundamental error, but none as well preserved or perfectly defined as Raymond's find. The 1975 penny, it turned out, was more than a standard-issue coin. It was a vessel of error, a rare glitch in the mint's normally precise system that allowed a small group of flawed coins to pass into circulation unnoticed. Over the next few years, coin forums, clubs, and auction houses began seeing more examples trickle in. Most were circulated and worn, bearing scratches and discoloration, but still showing the telltale signs of doubling or misstriking that hinted at their origin. In one extraordinary case, a woman in Oregon discovered an off-center 1975 penny in a jar of coins saved for her child's college fund. The strike was visibly shifted, with part of the design missing along the rim, a dramatic error that made the coin all the more desirable. The value of these error pennies didn't rise all at once. At first, they were curiosities, fetching small premiums from niche collectors. But as grading companies began certifying them and high-grade examples entered the market, demand surged. Prices climbed as the coin's rarity became clearer and its fame grew. A low mintage error from a high output year, it was the kind of paradox that made seasoned collectors take notice. The peak came when a pristine example with full red luster, no visible blemishes, and unmistakable doubling sold at auction. It had been found in a roll of uncirculated cents that had been stashed away in a bank vault for decades. A lucky collector, unaware of its significance at first, had sent the roll for grading on a whim. When the grades returned, one coin stood out. MS 66 red. Double die obverse. That single coin ignited a bidding war and sold for over 6 figures, proving that even among billions of coins, rarity and condition could converge to produce something truly extraordinary. What made the 1975 era pennies so alluring wasn't just their doubling. Some had off-center strikes that gave them a unique crescent shape. Others had faint planchet flaws or retained wire rim impressions, subtle signs that hinted at the mint's intense production speeds and the minute mistakes that sometimes slipped through. These flaws turned the ordinary into the exceptional, adding character and mystery to coins many might overlook. For collectors, the journey to find one became a ritual. Searching old rolls, scanning pocket change, checking dates with a loupe, and hoping for that flicker of doubling or that unusual curvature at the rim. It wasn't just about value, it was about discovery. The idea that something rare, something valuable, something historical could still be out there, tucked in an old drawer or stuck in a vending machine, waiting to be noticed. As time passed, the legend of the 1975 rare cent grew. New collectors joined the hunt, old ones preserved their finds in graded slabs and velvet-lined boxes. Auction houses continued to feature them in specialized error coin sections, and each new appearance was met with fresh curiosity. The value fluctuated with the market, but high-grade examples consistently brought in strong numbers. For Raymond, that first discovery became more than a collector's thrill. He kept the coin for years before finally parting with it through a private sale. The buyer, a collector with a focus on Lincoln cent varieties, paid a handsome sum to add it to his collection. Today, the coin sits at the heart of a display case, its story passed down from one collector to the next as a reminder that even the smallest mistake can leave an enormous mark, and in the end, that's the magic of the 1975 US 1-cent penny with its rare mint errors. Whether a double die obverse or a dramatic misstrike, these coins have become coveted relics of imperfection, windows into a brief lapse in the mechanical precision of the US Mint. For those fortunate enough to own a certified example in high grade, the reward is significant. Depending on condition, clarity of the error, and preservation of the original red hue, these rare 1975 Lincoln pennies can command between $50,000 and $112,000, turning a humble cent into a prized treasure that continues to astonish and inspire. In 1979, America stood on the threshold of a new decade. The 70s had been a turbulent time, filled with economic challenges, shifting social tides, and a growing appetite for change. Yet amidst all the noise of politics and pop culture, the United States Mint quietly continued its daily work, striking billions of coins that would pass anonymously through millions of hands. But hidden within the overwhelming mass of copper-colored pennies created that year, something rare emerged, a small number of 1,979 1-cent coins that would go on to stun collectors, not for their historical significance or mintage numbers, but for a subtle imperfection that turned them into numismatic gold. The 1979 penny, to the untrained eye, is just another Lincoln cent. It bears the same familiar portrait of President Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, a design by Victor David Brenner that had already endured for 70 years. The reverse featured the Lincoln Memorial, designed by Frank Gasparo. The coin was struck in copper-plated zinc alloy at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints. No one expected that anything remarkable could come from a coin that was minted by the billions. But that assumption would prove to be very wrong. At the Philadelphia Mint, production was running around the clock. Dies were being used rapidly to meet the nation's need for small change. This high-volume process left little room for precision with every strike. In that chaotic environment, certain dies deteriorated prematurely or were improperly aligned. Occasionally, a hubbing process would go slightly off-kilter. A batch of coins would be struck, bearing faint but unmistakable doubling on the date or inscriptions. Some would escape the mint without detection, entering the everyday world like any other penny, dropped into cash registers, slipped into change jars, or tossed on countertops without a second thought. One such coin found its way into the hands of a curious teenager in Ohio named Jeremy. A budding coin enthusiast, he had inherited his grandfather's old coin collection and had made a habit of checking his pocket change daily. One evening, as he sifted through a handful of cents from a convenience store, something caught his attention. The 1979 date on one penny looked strange. The numbers appeared to have shadows, and Liberty seemed to have an unusual, almost doubled look to it. Intrigued, Jeremy took the coin to his local coin club, where an older member examined it under a microscope. The room fell quiet. This was no ordinary penny. Experts confirmed that Jeremy's find was a double die obverse, a rare minting error that causes key elements of the design, like the date, Liberty, and the motto "In God We Trust," to appear double due to a misalignment during the die creation process. But what made his coin truly extraordinary wasn't just the doubling, it was the condition. It still retained its original red hue, had no major marks or blemishes, and showed full details even under magnification. A grading service later gave it a Mint State 66 red designation, and suddenly Jeremy's humble penny was worth more than his family's car. Stories like Jeremy's sparked a wave of renewed interest in 1979 cents. Coin collectors across the country began scouring rolls, jars, and bank bags looking for similar anomalies. Some coins were found with off-center strikes, giving them a crescent-shaped error pattern that added to their visual appeal. Others had clipped planchets, where part of the metal was missing from the edge, a result of misfeeds during the blanking process. These varieties added depth to the 1979 penny's reputation, not just as a coin with a rare double die, but as one capable of housing multiple types of striking errors that made each specimen unique. As more specimens came to light, auction houses began taking notice. A particularly well-preserved off-center 1979 penny sold for several $1,000s at a regional auction, surprising even seasoned dealers. Another coin, struck on a defective planchet and showing striking weakness in the lower obverse, fetched a premium due to its unusual appearance and the clarity of its error. Collectors were beginning to understand that the 1979 penny was more than just common pocket change. It was a canvas for rare minting mistakes that slipped through unnoticed in a high-output year. Even more rare were examples struck using a misaligned die pair, causing the obverse and reverse to be slightly off-centered from each other. Though these are not always dramatic enough to draw attention at first glance, experts can spot the subtle shift in alignment that makes such pieces rarities in their own right. Combine this with a pristine red finish and sharp strike details, and you have a coin that becomes the crown jewel of any Lincoln cent collection. What fascinated collectors most was how the errors occurred during a year not known for significant coinage events. Unlike 1955 or 1969, which had well-documented double die varieties, 1979 had no major headline-grabbing coin stories. That made the emergence of these rare error cents all the more surprising, and all the more exciting for those lucky enough to find them. The idea that a common year could still yield a treasure struck a chord with collectors new and old, breathing fresh life into penny hunting. One prominent numismatist, who had been collecting Lincoln cents since the 1960s, remarked that the discovery of these errors in 1979 coins reminded him of the thrill he first felt as a young collector. "You never know what might be hiding in plain sight," he said. "That's the beauty of this hobby. Even a coin you've seen 1,000 times might have a version that's worth a small fortune." Today, examples of the rare 1979 error pennies continue to trade hands at coin shows and auctions, their value determined by the type and severity of the error, the sharpness of the strike, and the overall condition of the coin. Coins that are circulated and show signs of wear still fetch solid premiums if the error is clear, while those in uncirculated mint state grades with full red coloration and sharply defined doubling or misstrikes can command astonishing prices. It's a reminder that even in a year with no special commemorations, no metal composition changes, and no dramatic shifts in design, the ordinary can become extraordinary through nothing more than a tiny flaw in a die or a momentary lapse in a press cycle. The 1979 penny, like so many other hidden gems of American coinage, teaches us that history and value often lie in the imperfections, the tiny deviations that give a simple object a story worth telling. For those fortunate enough to find or own one of these rare 1979 US 1-cent pennies with mint errors such as a double die obverse, off-center strike, or other unusual production anomalies, the reward goes far beyond just bragging rights. Depending on the clarity of the error, the coin's condition, and the color designation, these coins have been known to sell for anywhere between $44,000 and $110,000, turning what once was just a penny into a life-changing piece of history.